So I'll just minimize these windows. Okay. Then I'll change my editor to the shader editor. Then I'll select the Lollipop itself and click on new, and I'll change the name to Lollipop. So to work with this, we're first of all going to start with the displacement, right? So with lollipops, usually the surface is always a bit rough, a bit bumpy. So that's what I'm going to start setting up. So I'll hit Shift A, and basically for those surface imperfections, surface displacements, we are going to make use of a bunch of noise texture nodes. So the first one I'll use is the Voronoi texture, and I'll hit Control T so that I can bring up the texture coordinate and the mapping. So ensure that the texture node is selected, then you hit Control T to get this. The reason I'm using Control T, or the reason I'm able to use Control T, is because under Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, I have the Node Wrangler add-on active. So if you hit on Control T but then you don't get anything, that could be you have this add-on either off or it's not installed. So you need to install it. So then I'll hit Control Shift to preview the Voronoi texture. Then I'll change the texture coordinate projection. So I don't want it to use any generated UV. I want it to kind of project, or rather have the texture be projected on the object. So I'll click on the object option and direct it to the vector. Then, of course, what we're seeing kind of disappears. So we need to go to the Voronoi texture. And in here, we're going to change the F1 to distance to edge. Then I'll adjust the scale. So 5 is quite small, so we're not seeing anything. So I'll use like a crazy value. So I could use, let's say, 250 and hit enter. And then we are going to start seeing something. Then I can start reducing it. So let's say maybe 100. Be lower. Let's do, is it like 50? So now that the scale is 50, we can try to reduce it further, but I think 50 is fine if I just look around, right? So this is what is going to drive the cracks that appear in some lollipops. So I'll hit Shift A and I will add a color ramp. And then I just want to use the color ramp to add contrast. So with this white part, the white stop, I'll drag it back or towards the black one. So something like that. Then whether this is too clean in terms of like the part itself. So I would like to introduce a bit of distortion, right? And here in the Voronoi texture, we don't have like a distortion option. So to add distortion, I'll select these two and just move them. I'll hit G. Then I'll hit Shift A, and then I'll add a noise. So what I want to do is I want to use a noise texture, and I want this noise texture to introduce a bit of distortion to this. So instead of directing this mapping node directly to the vector, I want us to mix these two together, and then that result will feed it to the vector. Then we are going to have a bit of distortion for the noise, that is the Voronoi texture. So I'll hit Shift A and I'll add a mapping node for the noise texture itself. And then I will use the object output, connect it to this mapping, this vector output to the vector input, the noise. Okay. Then I'll hit Shift A and we'll add a mix. So I'll add a mix color, and I'll connect this vector output for the mapping to the A input, and then the factor output to the B input. I want to preview the noise and I want to adjust its scale. So let's say put 100. Let's do 250, something like that, right? Then I want these results to be directed to the vector. So I'll click on this result output, connect it to the vector. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm using the clean coordinates from the object, and then I'm mixing them with a noise texture. And then that result, we are feeding it to the Voronoi texture. So now if I preview the color ramp, so Control Shift click, this is what we have. And it kind of looks like it's a bit messy, but the thing is, I don't want this to be too much. I want it to be subtle. So I'll input a really tiny value, so maybe 0.001. And you can notice now that this kind of is distorted a bit. So we're not using it too much, or we're not using a value that's too high. Okay, or you can try 0.3 maybe, but that now becomes a bit much. So 0.15 would be okay. So if you compare how this was before, so if I direct the mapping directly to the Voronoi, it's a clean. But if I direct the mix to the Voronoi, we get a bit more distortion. And that's the target of this setup here, right? So we are mixing the default values, so the default position, rotation, and scale together with the noise. So we're using the noise to kind of create the distortion, right? Then another thing I'd like to do is, this is too perfect. Like if we fed this to a displacement, it would be too perfect. So one of the things I'd like to do is this selected. Don't even select this, it's not a must. So I'll just hit Shift A and then we'll search for displacement. Okay. Then I want to direct this color ramp to, if I zoom in, I want to direct it to the height, and then I want to direct the displacement to the displacement of the material output. So now if I preview it, so if I connect this principled BSDF to the surface, this is what we have, and it actually doesn't look good. So what we need to do is we need to go to the options, and under settings, look for displacement. On displacement, instead of bump only, choose displacement and bump, and then we'll get an even more crazier result. Then now in the displacement node, I can come in and adjust the scale. So I'll use a value lower than 0.01, so I could use 0.005. Still a bit much. Let's do 1 there, but it's not perfect. Let's do 2.5, right? So if I preview this, you can see that the result we're getting is not that good. So I can come in here and push this further, make this tighter, like that. Okay. So you could make it tighter. If you wanted it like to be really sharp, something like that. Okay. Then with this, it's too perfect if you look at it. So this is not what I would intend for it to look like. So let's fix this. So I want certain areas to have the cracks, and then some should not have the cracks, right? So we're going to introduce a new noise. So we could organize this So I could kind of group this. So I'll select that, Shift P, I'll hit F2, and I'll call this like cracks distortion. Okay, just to have it be on its own, it's less confusing. And then these are the cracks. So you could rename this. You could select it, hit F2, and then call it cracks. And then of course we have the color ramp that's adding contrast to this. So I'm going to hit Shift A, and we're going to add a noise texture. Then I'll create a mapping node for this, and I'll direct this object to the mapping, then this vector output to the vector input of the noise. Control Shift click, preview. Let's start with 50. Let's do 150. And then I'll hit Shift A, and then I'll add a color ramp. So now I want to actually make I want the noise to be like chunks of white and black. Okay. So something like that. Then I want to combine this noise and this, and then the result of these two, we can feed it to the displacement. So the reason I have this noise is because I don't want to have the cracks be predictable or all over, right? I want maybe the crack to get somewhere here, then stop, then it begins elsewhere, something like that. So I'll hit Shift A, and then add a mix, and I'll choose a mix color, and then I'll connect the color from the first color ramp, color from the second color ramp, and then we can preview. So Control Shift. Then what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to change the blending mode from mix to lighten. And you'll notice now that we have areas that are darker than others. So to add even more contrast to this, we can add a color ramp after this. So Shift A, color ramp, then connect it after this mix. And then we can add more contrast. So if I wanted more white, right? So something like that. Okay. So now we have the cracks, but they're not predictable. And this is what is breaking up that predictability. So we mix it with the color ramp, and then we change the Voronoi texture, and then we change the blending mode to lighten, but also add wax and screen as well. So either of those three. So lighten, screen, and add, they're going to work. Okay. Then we'll feed this. So we'll feed this color to the height. And then now you can select this, hit G to move them, then connect this to here. So now you'll see what we have, right? So then if you want to introduce a bit more variation to this, you can come in here and play with the rotation. That is in the Voronoi, for the mapping node for the Voronoi texture, not for the noise, for the Voronoi, because that's what would change the rotation node for the Voronoi. So if I adjust this, not the scale, because the scale will mess it up. So if I adjust this, you can get different results, right? So I'll take them back to 0. Then I'll add a value node. So Shift A, value, and I'll use it to adjust on all axes. So I'll connect this value to rotation. Then now if I adjust the value, we can get different results, right? You can also do the same for any of these mapping nodes, depending on what you want it to affect. So you can not only constrain it to the mapping node that controls the Voronoi, you can do it for the others as well. So this helps you to kind of adjust the type of variation that you have, right? Then of course you can come to the Voronoi and you can adjust the scale, and of course you'll get different things, but I found that staying between 50 and 55 works fine for me. Then once we have that, the setup for the surface displacement is done. So this is how I've introduced the cracks, but of course this is not like the final thing, because we have to introduce a bit of surface bump, and then we also have to introduce some dots, because the surface is not perfect, so we have to introduce some dots as well. So there's still much that needs to be done for this particular setup. So when it comes to the color, I'll use a noise. So noise, and again a color ramp. Then I'll let it have its own mapping and texture coordinate node, but you can extract it, or you can use this one as well. But let me just create a new one. So Control T. Then I will change this to object, that is the texture coordinate. And then I'll preview the texture. I'll increase the scale. So let's say 150. I want it to be smaller than this. So let's say 350. And then I'll connect this factor to the factor of the color ramp, and then I can preview the color ramp. Then I can set up the color. So I want the lollipop to be, let's say, red, purple, green, whatever. You can choose whatever you like, right? So I'll click on this, stop. I'll increase the value. Then I'll choose red. Okay. Then I'll go to this other stop. Double click on the color. Click on the eyedropper. Pick this red. Then for the stop that is on the left, I'll select it. Then I'll make the color darker. Right? Then I'll connect this to the base color of the principled BSDF. Then I can click Control Shift so that the principled BSDF is connected to the surface. So this is what we have. It's not much, but it's something, right? So let me move this up, move this as well. So this is the color, right? So we can group it. So Shift P, F2, lollipop, color. Then I need to introduce some surface displacement other than this, right? So some bump. So I'll hit Shift A, and then I'll add a bump node. Okay. And I want this bump node to be driven by a noise. So we can duplicate this noise, or we can create a new one. So let me create a new one, noise texture. Then I'll connect this vector to the vector of the noise, and then this factor to the height. Then I can preview this noise, and I'll set up, let's say 400, maybe 600. Then we can preview the bump. So Control Shift click, see what's happening. Well, this is a bit much if you look at it, so we can reduce the strength. I want it to be even more bumpier, so maybe I could do like 1500, something like that. Then reduce the strength. Okay. Then we can connect this normal output to the normal input of the principled BSDF. Then we can preview. Then I can adjust the strength of the bump. So something like that. Right? That is too much, so maybe let me dial it down. Okay. Then the candies, they usually have dots on them. So let me select all of these and just move them down. So they usually have dots on them. So for that, we'll make use of the Voronoi. So I'll hit Shift A, and then Voronoi texture. Connect this to the vector. And then I'll preview this. So Control Shift. I'll increase the scale to 50. I'll hit Shift A and add a color ramp because we want to introduce some contrast. Okay, so we have that, and I'll take this white closer to the black. Then I'll increase the number, let's say 750. Then I'll adjust the detail a bit. And I've noticed that what the detail does is it gives us dots that are some that are very dark and some that are gray. So that's going to create good contrast for the dots. So there are some that are going to be deep, there are some that are going to be shallow based on the black color that we have. So I could do 1200 maybe. And then I'll add another bump. Okay. Then this bump is going to be connected after the first one, and the normal output of the first bump should be connected to the normal input of the second bump. And then this color output is going to be connected to the height. Then we can preview it, so Control Shift. So this is a bit much, so we can reduce the strength to something smaller, maybe something like that. Okay, then we can preview, so Control Shift on the principled BSDF. Then we can adjust the strength again. So something like that, because I want them to be seen. Okay. Then I can go to, let's say here, make this adjustment, maybe 20. 0, let's see what 0 gives us. 0 gives us that. So maybe something like that. And then I can increase the scale. But I don't want it to be super crazy. That is the scale for the Voronoi. If I increase it too much, then it becomes kind of crazy in a way. Becomes too much. We can also adjust the scale for the noise as well. That's going to allow us to see different results, right? So if I preview this, so we can get different results. So if I zoom out and Control Shift on the principled BSDF, okay. So we have our dots, we have our displacement, we have a bit of surface bump, but of course this doesn't look like a lollipop, to be honest. So we'll need to push this further. So that would be starting with the roughness, so I can reduce the roughness. Okay, maybe up to that point, because the lollipops are very reflective. Then we can go to subsurface. So under subsurface, we can increase the weight. So we can use, like, let's say 0.1. We don't see a change, but it needs to be like really subtle. We're just allowing some light to just pass through just a bit. So I'll use that. Then when it comes to the radius, so here I'm choosing which color I want to be more prominent. So this is RGB. So this is red, blue, and red, green, and blue, sorry. So here I could say maybe for the red, I want the red to be more prominent, so I can make it like, let's say 2. It's going to make the red stand out more. Then we have this scale. So the scale is the factor. So whichever value we have here is multiplied by this. So if we have 2, so 2 times 0.05, that's going to be what the red is going to be. 0.2 times this and 0.1 times this. So this is something I could tinker with, or I could leave it out, but I just want it to be there. I don't want it to be too much like that. I want it to be 1. I just want it to be there, but it's really tiny, right? Because if I take it too far, then, well, it kind of starts looking like candy, but I don't want it to be this much. right? But you can experiment. Okay. The other thing we need to play around with is, and the specular is fine. We're not going to change anything. We're not going to change the IOR level. We're going to leave it as it is. In the transmission, this is what we want. So the lollipops, they usually allow light to pass through a lot. So we're going to increase the transmission to, let's say, 0.9. But you can take it to 1 if you'd like. But I want it to be, let's say, 0.9. Okay. Another thing that I would like to add is an environment. You don't have an environment, so let's add an environment. So to do that, at the top here, we can change where we change the window or the editor that we're in. Next to that, we have object. So choose world, and then we'll add a map. So I'll hit Shift A, and then I'll search for environment texture. Then I'll hit Control T, so that we get the texture coordinate and the mapping. And then you can connect this color to color. And then I'll load up an image. So I'll go to where I have my HDRI and I'll select this one, click on open. So these HDRIs, I have downloaded them from Polyhaven. So you can of course go to the site, but I'll try and link the image that I used in the description. I'll select it, click on open image. We have an environment, right? So we need to, of course, get rid of the environment itself. We don't want to see it. So I'll change the editor to properties, and then I'll go to the render, and I'll go to film, and I'll turn on transparent. Then I can go back to the shader editor. Then I can reduce the strength. So let's do 0.7. Then I can go back to object from world, right? Then we're not yet done. The other thing I'd like to add is a coat. So a coat is like a top surface that covers the object. So this lollipop. So I'll increase the weight. Say something like that, because without it, that's how it looks like. So I'll increase the weight to, let's say, 0.6. The roughness, I'll leave it really low. But if you increase the roughness, that means that the coat itself becomes more diffuse, becomes more spread out. So I'll leave it as it was, right? Okay. And once we have that, we have our lollipop. So if I get into the camera view, we have our lollipop. We can come in here in the cracks setup, and we can make other adjustments. Like if I wanted, for example, I wanted this to be different, maybe would make it more black. So this creates like deeper cracks. Okay, I can preview it, Control Shift. This isn't appealing because it becomes too much in a way. So if you need to pinch it back, right? We can play around with the color ramp for the noise. So if you want more cracking, you ramp up the black. Okay. Then you can see the dots quite well. You can further refine this by adjusting, for example, the rotation of the Voronoi. So I could take this to, let's say, maybe something like this. right? Then another thing I could do is after the color option, you can hit Shift A and look for hue saturation value. Then I want to bump the saturation up to the maximum 2, so it becomes even more red. Then for the hue, you can actually use the hue to change the color of your particular lollipop, right? So I'll leave it at 0.5. What I want to change or make adjustments to is my lighting. So I'll change my editor to 3D viewport. And then I want to make a few changes to this. So if I switch to the top view and I move the key, like this is the key light, and I move it, I hit G, you can see you can detect that movement in the reflection, right? So I just want to move them a bit. Okay, then for the back, I want to make it really small, so I'll hit S, scale it down. You see we get this drastic change, right? Now I want to move it far away, so G, Y, move it further back. And then I can go to the settings of this. So let me create a new window. So at the bottom here, once I see the crosshairs, I can click, hold, and drag. And I'll change this to properties. With this light selected, I can go to the light settings and I can reduce the power to, let's say, 0.5 if you don't want it to be that hot, because 2 is a bit much, you can see. So 0.5 work fine. Then I can choose to scale it up, maybe increase the power or not. So that's going to be your decision. So I'll leave it at 0.5. Okay. So here when it comes to the key, you can scale it up, move it. The same for this. So I'm looking at the powers for this. So this is fine, right? Then we have to create the material for this. This is the stick. So Lollipop, let's just call it like stick. Okay. So for this, I'll use a noise texture, and I just want it to be white and gray. So I'll hit Control T to bring up the texture coordinate and the mapping. Then I'll switch the texture coordinate output from generated to object, then Control Shift to preview this. By preview, it choose something high like 250. Now hit Shift A, choose a color ramp. Then, of course, if you try to add contrast, you'll see what you have, but you can start adjusting. I want this to be like a gray, the black stuff. So I'll make it into like a gray, like so. Then I'll connect it to the base color. Okay. Then I want to have like subtle bump. So I'll hit Shift A, search for bump, connect it to normal. And then I can use this noise and connect it to the height of the bump. Then you can see by preview, it's a bit much. So what you can do, you can reduce the strength. Okay. And I can preview, Control Shift. So it doesn't have like a huge influence in regards to color. It's just white and gray. And then of course I'll make it more diffuse, because I want it to be like those paper sticks, because some of these candies, they come with like a paper stick. So I wanted to have that paper stick that is very diffuse, so the roughness will be quite low. Oh, sorry, quite high, not even quite low. So I'll use 0.7. Okay, if I get to the camera view, so this is what we have. You can still select the texture for the shader for the lollipop and make your changes, right? So you can play around with that. You can come in, adjust the factor. So you can do 0.003. See what you get. Adjust the scale, right? So the higher the scale, the more the cracks are going to be. So if you want it to be those candies that look like they've gone through something, you can increase that. Okay. Then adjust this value for the rotation to get different results. Okay. So we have our lollipop, right? So we started with the displacement first, then we worked with the color, then we came and added the surface bump, then we added the dots. So for the dots, you can increase the strength further, but not too much. Like if you feel you're not seeing it enough from a distance, you can increase that, right? You can come in the hue saturation value node. My saturation is 2 because I want it to be really, really red. And then the hue, you can change it, and that changes the color of your lollipop, right? So that's how you set up the shader for the lollipop.